You weren't kidding, it is really bright up here. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. My name is Laura Tacho. I'm the CTO at DX. If you haven't heard of DX, we are a developer intelligence platform. So we're getting data from your workflow systems, Git, Jira, et cetera, and then also developer experience data from your developers, putting them together and helping you figure out where the bottlenecks are, how you can improve performance, and most recently, very importantly for a lot of you, how AI is impacting your software delivery. I want to talk to you today a little bit about developer experience, why it matters and why it matters even more now that we're using AI to develop software. We'll talk about what sets orgs apart that have great developer experience and those that don't, how you can measure it, how you can improve it. We'll talk about AI's impact, and then finally, what to do next. I want to start, though, with a bit of a story about some mythical creatures. Here is a bunch of mythical creatures on the screen here. Some of them I hadn't heard about. There's another mythical creature that you probably have heard about, and that is the 10x developer. 10x developer is a complete myth, but like any myth, it does have an origin story. There's a reason that we have this story about the 10x developer. And it comes from this book called Peopleware and this exercise called the Coding War Games. What the Coding War Games were was 600 developers from all different companies, about 92 different companies, and they all had to complete a coding task. So they were paired with other people, not pair programming, but set against another person. These were meaningful tasks, and they assessed whether the person was able to code a technically accurate, complete solution, how long it took them, and then they ranked the results. And what they found was that indeed there was a 10x difference between the good and the bad. But the 10x difference came on the organization level. When we looked within the organization, the difference between individual developers was only about 20%. But looking at the great organizations and the poor organizations, there was about an 11.1x difference. So the 10x factor is there, but it pertains to the organization and not to the individual. So what makes an organization perform 10 times better than your peers who are performing poorly? Some of you probably have heard of Deming and his theories, and one of the quotes from Deming that is very appropriate in this context is that a bad system will beat a good person every time. Your developers are limited in their performance based on the system they operate in. Developer experience is the language that we have to describe the system in which we develop software. A system with very little friction and very little toil is a great developer experience. And that's what we need in order to get the 10x results. How do we measure developer experience? Developer experience has a bit of marketing problem, I will say. When we think about developer experience, we think about free beer, naps, ping pong. It can come across as something that is not very important to the business because it is seen as a value add and not something that is existential. It's our job as folks in this room to talk about developer experience using maybe different language and bringing research into the picture, which is very important to me personally and the work that I do at DX. When we talk about measuring developer experience, academic researchers and field researchers, folks who are studying organizations, have tried to quantify and come up with methods to measure software engineering performance and developer experience for well over a decade. A decade ago is when the DORA metrics came on the scene. DORA metrics are very good for measuring software delivery capabilities. They're measuring how quickly you can move code from a laptop into a customer-facing environment. That's not enough to cover developer experience. And so the same researchers continued and evolved their approach to studying organizations and how they work. The SPACE framework came out in 2021, the DevEx framework in 2023, and then in 2024, we all worked together to put a very clear guidance on how to measure developer experience, and that is the DX Core 4, which I'm a co-author of. The DX Core 4 explains developer experience using the language of business, also the language of engineers. But the purpose here is to help organizations understand why developer experience is important, and more specifically, prove why it is critical and essential for the business, why DevEx matters, even in the age of AI. We're looking at developer experience with 4 main pillars. We're looking at effectiveness, which is things like deep work, clear requirements, being able to get feedback quickly from local tests in your local environment. We're looking at speed, also quality and impact. And it's so important to look at all of these together to understand how your system, how your developer experience is actually working. Once we get a sense of how to measure it, that is it's not the easy part. It's not easy, but that is the more straightforward part. It happens at the beginning. What's very difficult is understanding what to do in order to improve developer experience. When we look at the core 4, we've got these 4 dimensions, and they hold each other in tension. We don't want to increase the speed that we operate, so ship more stuff to production while quality suffers. We don't want to improve quality to the point where we slow down, don't spend any time on innovation, and stop shipping stuff to production. That's also not good. We need to have all of these really balanced. Your organizations are likely talking, especially with AI, about getting more code to customers faster, cheaper, smarter. We're trying to set our sights on efficiency gains with AI. What we found with studying developer experience is that, yes, AI is a mechanism to do that, but the real lever that organizations have is actually developer experience and those principles that I know all of you in this room know are incredibly important to getting your day-to-day work done with little friction and little toil. This effectiveness pillar here, although they're all shown in a row next to each other, should be at the top. When organizations improve developer experience, they see speed increase, they see quality increase, and they see innovation increase all at the same time. This isn't my opinion or something that I wish was true. We have data from thousands of organizations that show this is the case. What's difficult is making the case to your business leaders and to your, what I will call upstairs management sometimes, that these things are critical business problems, which is why I want to give you some of that language today to help you when you're describing these things in your own organizations. Developer experience, to get very specific about what we mean when we talk about developer experience. There are 14 drivers of developer experience that shape what that looks like. So we're talking about language to describe the system in which your developers operate to ship code, to produce code, ship it to customers. Things like code maintainability, code review, incident response, even planning process, user centricity, these are all factors of developer experience. Incident handling is just as important as having clear process, and we have a data-backed link to all of these factors to organizational improvement. Sometimes we find ourselves in scenarios where developers advocating for better CI/CD pipelines or advocating for clearer specs might just come across as, developers just want things done better, they have unrealistic expectations. But when we frame it in a research-backed framework like the Developer Experience Index, which is what I'm showing here, and the Core 4, we can bring data and research, and more importantly, a link to money into the conversations, and we have a better chance of getting our point across with our organizations and understanding why this is so important. If you are curious or you are hungry for more data to articulate why these things are important for your own organization, I have a free template for how you can start to gather data on not all of these drivers, 10 of them, along with the quality, impact, and speed dimensions as well. It's behind the QR code. You can do it with Google Forms, with Typeform, with whatever kind of form you want. This is a very easy way to deploy and get some metrics out of your organization without having to worry about really complex data pipelines, ETL pipelines, or gobbling up system data. When you have this information, what you will end up with is a map. And I want to show you a little bit about how I approach diagnosing these bottlenecks and improving developer experience in organizations. In this particular organization, we can look at the DevEx drivers. So they've done an analysis of their bottlenecks. They've tried to understand what is holding them back from improving their system so they can get those 10x results. And they found that, in fact, local iteration speed is something a lot of developers are really struggling with right now. We can see a benchmark, and we can see how many developers are voting for local iteration speed as their top problem. It actually comes back as the number 2 thing that developers want fixed in order to have a better developer experience. When you also collect attributes along with this data, you can do some interesting cohort analysis and try to find the hotspots and issues. So this is taking these problems of developer experience that are holding your organization back from delivering those 10x results and saying, all right, we know that local iteration speed is a problem. We hear developers explaining their pain all the time. But here is how big that pain is and the opportunity that we will get when we fix it. This changes the conversation quite a lot from something developers are complaining about to something that is existential for our business to achieve the results that we want to see. In this case, it is junior backend developers working on a particular set of components that are having the worst experience. Instead of trying to solve this problem for everyone then, we can solve it for smaller groups in smaller chunks and see the results and test our strategy as we go along. We can also see a big difference between, for example, Node developers and Ruby developers when it comes to the build and test processes that they have. So we have some opportunity to learn from each other, which is also another a great way to use this data to encourage community building, to encourage knowledge sharing in your organization. Looking at this, CI wait time is correlated. So we're getting a sentiment-based, how satisfied are you with build and test kind of data point with the on the left-hand side here, but we can actually look into system data and correlate the two together. CI wait time, 3.63 hours a week on average waiting for CI to run is not great. When we break that down even more, we see that, wow, it is much higher for the Node users than the Ruby users. So this sentiment of I'm not satisfied with build and test, when we can correlate it with system data, we have such a strong argument, not just about the validity of the developers saying my developer experience is poor, but we can actually quantify how much time your organization is wasting. And when I say that it is the organization level that leads to these 10x outcomes, these are exactly the kinds of things that I'm talking about. Because an individual isn't going to be able to fix this problem. This is a systems level problem. That's why we see 10x performance on the organization level, not actually at the individual level. OK, let's talk about AI. Because that 10x performance multiplier is often what I see on LinkedIn and probably what you see on LinkedIn about AI is going to let us do 10 times more work, 10 times faster, bringing in, 10 times the revenue. The reality is that in order for your background agents or even working in an agentic IDE to work really, really well, you need to have some fundamentals in place. So we need things like clear abstractions. We need CI/CD. We need automated testing, observability, clear requirements. Without these, our agents cannot work very well. This is what we can call now Agent X. We had DevEx and we have Agent X before. But if you're looking at these and thinking, that all seems very sensible, surprise, everything that AI needs in order to work really well is the exact same thing that we need as developers, as human beings, to operate very well. We're in an incredibly strange environment right now with AI coming onto the scene, where the things that are good to help AI perform in the ways that our leadership expects are exactly the same things that we've known all along, belong to developer experience, and help us as developers get our work done in the best way. When we think about AI, some organizations are viewing it still as what I can only describe as individual speed-up juice for tasks on the task level. They've taken a spray and pray approach to AI. Let's give every person, every developer in our organization a license. and then hope that because developers are just very curious and they are determined, and this is exciting technology, that the rest will take care of itself. When we take that approach and don't think about AI on a system level, the incremental time gains that an individual will get from speeding up a coding task just get gobbled up by the rest of the system. As Deming said, a bad system will beat a good person every time. Unless we change the system with AI, we're not actually going to see the organizational benefit. Any incremental benefit that we get, a speed up from AI, I have never actually come across an organization where the speed up on the individual task level outweighs any other factor of developer experience. So for example, the most common thing that I see is that organizations who have meeting-heavy days for developers, I often see organizations where developers have meetings all day, 5 days a week. Fixing that will bring enormous benefit that far outweighs the incremental benefit that we get from AI. If we take AI and aim it at making information and documentation better so that we can avoid the meetings altogether and get more time for focus work, that is a great way to aim AI at a developer experience problem. We get the benefit of using shiny new stuff, which is exciting, but we're fixing where the bottleneck really is. Non-AI factors right now are still outweighing AI benefits, especially when we look at the task level. One piece of encouragement about AI, first of all, it's not a silver bullet. We still have to focus on fundamentals, but right now organizations really have their wallets open for AI. We're at a point where organizations are willing to invest in things like agent experience, which we know is just developer experience in a different outfit. They're willing to invest in it because it helps them get more return on their investment from AI. And so we're in a very unique position as developers to use AI and use this moment as an opportunity to get a lot of the plumbing work, the developer experience work done that we knew mattered all the time. Now it's a little bit easier to secure budget for it, which is a nice position to be in. I speak with a lot of other executives and senior engineering leaders, senior ICs who say, you know, before I would struggle to get budget to improve our CI/CD pipelines. It was so difficult. I want a new observability tool, very, very difficult to get funding. This is the first time that they're feeling that their leadership outside of engineering is actually putting pressure on them to adopt the technology faster, giving them money to enable that faster. It's a very unusual moment that we find ourselves in. Okay, so what does this all mean, and what should you do next? I want to go back to the point that I made first about developer experience and having a bit of a marketing problem. I am very comfortable talking about developer experience as developer experience in this room with folks I know who understand. I am a developer at heart. I was working on Docker back on like day 2 of Docker. I have a long history with CNCF as well, working on Kubernetes. I was on the technical steering committee for Containerd and Moby project stuff. So you know, I really get it, and I feel like you in this room, we have a lot in common. When we go into conversations, though, and as we all get older and more advanced in our careers, and we go into conversations with leadership, and we have to make a business case for these developer experience tools and practices and improvements, it's important that we get our messaging right. Developer experience, when we say it to someone who hasn't been a developer like we all are, comes across as naps and ping pong and free beer. We have to make it really clear we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is unlocking bottlenecks and unlocking the opportunity for our organization to perform 10x better. There are no 10x developers, but there are 10x organizations. Developer experience is how we get there. Capitalizing on the AI moment is definitely important right now. Definitely important right now, and we have a lot of opportunity to make these arguments really clear. The DevEx Venn diagram, this is one thing that I like to also share as a personal story of why I've worked in developer tooling for the last 15 years, why I'm so focused on developer experience right now at this stage in my career. Oftentimes, when we think about something that's good for business and something that's good for developers, they might not overlap. Developer experience is the one place where that Venn diagram is a circle. I think the only thing I can think of that falls outside of the circle is maybe tripling the salary for all of your developers. Maybe that's not a great business decision, but everything else is. Investing in observability, investing in better build tooling, investing in better planning processes, listening to developers when we say, hey, there's too many meetings, I can't get my work done, I don't have enough focus time. These are not just nice to haves, they are existential for your business, especially as you need to stay competitive in a very changing and competitive landscape now that AI is on the scene. DevEx is good for business, period. Again, if you need some hard evidence for why DevEx is good for business, we actually can point to a statistical model that correlates developer experience to time savings. Right now, time savings is being talked about as one of the biggest benefits of AI. I'm not arguing or disagreeing that developers are saving a lot of time with AI. They definitely are. I spend nearly all of my time right now researching the AI's impact on software development organizations. And the median time savings right now is about 4.1 hours per week per developer, time savings coming from using AI tools. That is about 10%. It's definitely not 10x. But there are other opportunities across the SDLC in the realm of developer experience that will bring definitely more time savings than that 4 hours. And in fact, every point increase in developer experience, so every incremental increase in developer experience, we're getting about 13 minutes per week back per developer. That's about 10 hours per year, and that is the data that we have that we've run through many different models. When we think about it that way and multiply it across how many developers that you have, and think about the opportunity that there is to improve things like incident response, monitoring, observability, planning processes, there is huge opportunity with and without AI to reduce time loss and to reduce the toil and friction that developers experience day to day getting their work done. Remember that non-AI factors still outweigh a lot of the AI benefits. We have to focus on a systems level. And if you need help having these conversations with your leadership, please ping me on LinkedIn. I would be very happy to help you use the right language to get that point across. When thinking about data, one thing that's important for me to leave you with is that being data-driven, using data like this in your conversations with leadership isn't an immutable trait. It's not something that you either are or you aren't. It's something that you can learn how to do, even if your organization hasn't caught up with you. I had a link to a template to start getting some developer experience data so that you can have more informed decisions and more informed discussions about developer experience with your organization. This is something that comes with practice, and it's OK to start very small with Post-its on a board or even just a small 5-question survey for your developers. The best place to start is by starting. The measurements are here to help your teams improve. That's also very important. I think with AI and the economic pressure that it brings, there's a lot of hesitancy, perhaps, to use data because it can feel like we're being spied on a little bit. Make sure that measurements are there for the purpose of improvement and not just reporting, because that is really how organizations get better and can move toward those 10x results that we spoke about earlier. The very final thought is that engineers work on systems. Developer experience isn't a nice to have. It's not about nap pods and beer. Developer experience is the language that we have to describe the systems where engineers work. You are responsible for building that system, but your organization is also responsible for building that system. They might need some education and different language, and you can help bridge the gap. But at the end of the day, developer experience is the most important thing that organizations can do to improve their performance. It improves business performance, but it also makes your day-to-day just a lot better. That Venn diagram is a circle. It's good for business. It's good for the developer. And I hope that having some more language about this helps you have better conversations and make better decisions about investing in DevEx in the future. Because there are lots of mythical creatures out there, 10x developer being one of them. But the 10x organization is not a myth. It is very real. We see it in data repeated decade over decade in all kinds of industries, all kinds of sectors. You can get to those 10x performance gains through developer experience, not through AI, but through developer experience. That is where we should be focusing on. Good. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions, and otherwise I'll be around during the break. I would love to chat with you more if that's something you're interested in.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Good.
Thank you so much, and also for sharing all of the insights from your research, especially like the time spent in meetings, right?
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Who feels that same pressure? Too much time spent in meetings? So, folks, we have the mic runner and the Haribo runner. Who has a question for Laura? We have about 2-3 minutes. Nico is fast today.
The hand was up early.
Yeah, hi Laura, thank you for the talk. That was really interesting. I have a question for you. So do you have any advice for startups, how they can measure their developer experience?
Yeah, I think startups, so before I'll give you a long answer, sorry. I'll try to keep it short, but I worked at CodeShip, which is an Austrian startup. If you've heard of CodeShip, maybe if you've been around, we did kind of Dockerize CI/CD. We started, we were a CI/CD startup, but we started with full CD at the very, very beginning. And that habit stayed with us as we grew. And when I talk about startups and measuring developer experience, a lot of startups say, oh, but isn't it too early? We can all just sit at the table and talk. And that is true, but if you have the data and you have the habits immediately, as you start in these small startup, they will stay with you as you scale. I would recommend starting with just a survey or hooking up some very basic data together, maybe from your source control repositories or your ticketing systems, and then cross-referencing that with developer experience data. You can do that mostly by yourself, depending on how big your organization is. The template that I shared in the talk, and I'll put these on LinkedIn or somehow we'll distribute them, but you can do it on your own that way. I think that's a really good place for startups to start. Don't think about it as something that's only important for big organizations with big budgets. You can do a lot as a startup, and those habits are really critical.
Thanks for the question. Anybody else? How is your moment? We still have 2 minutes left. Just raise your hand and Nico will find you.
You get candy, I heard.
And you get candy, yeah, if you like sugar.
It'd be good for someone who had a few too many beers last night, then a little pick me up.
For that, I would need a lot of candy now. Anybody else?
Yes.
Yeah.
What I've observed is that those tools very often pinpoint down where you have an issue, but never help you finding the solutions. And organizations are struggling to get into the moving part because they knew they had the issue and that the lead time was long and it takes everything forever. So how does the DX framework differ from the previous ones in making it easier to get actionable items out?
Yeah, I think that's a shortcoming of a lot of frameworks because we look at, let's talk about the DX Core 4 framework, or we can talk about DORA metrics, right? If we have long lead time, or let's say we're looking at PR throughput or deployment frequency. Okay, I have 2 deploys a week and I want to get to 5. The framework isn't going to do the lifting to show me what I need to do to get from A to B. When we look at the Core 4 framework, developer experience is at the top. And so if we're looking to improve, for example, throughput, speed, number of PRs that get shipped to production per developer per week, we can look at all the factors in that developer experience dimension, and there's 14 of them there. Chances are, and I've found this to be true in nearly every case, there's going to be 1 or 2 things that stick out from the data as the things to focus on. It's not just about looking at the workflow data or even the response data from the surveys. We have to actually then talk to developers, get their ideas, understand if there's local improvements to be made in the team level, or if there's system level, like platform engineering level changes to be made. I think one of my evergreen piece of advice with frameworks is that the metrics are not going to tell you what you need to do to improve. There needs to be additional conversation around the specific things, and chances are your team knows and has suggestions to do it. We just need to capture it, and then more importantly, measure the progress once we've made an hypothesis. Treat it like an experiment.
Thanks, fully agree.
Thank you everyone for the questions, and thanks again, Laura. Another round of applause, please.